Hi guys, so I decided to make a substance designer tutorial for beginners from time to time, and I want to show you how to achieve good looking materials with a relatively small amount of nodes used. The first one will be an ice floe PBR material, so let's begin. So this is my template. I push the normal a bit higher normally, using invert grayscale with invert felts to have only one output, so it's much easier to maintain the graph. So at first we will be using a tile sampler node to make a Voronoi pattern, which is the base for our material. And we will combine it with a distance node and with edge detect to get the pattern we need. So that looks good. Now we will use a crystal 1 node with directional warp to break the straight lines. So we will set the scale of the crystal 1 a bit lower, like 5. And we will push the scale for the intensity for the directional warp a bit higher. So now we will combine a flood fill with flood fill to grayscale and distance to get a bit more details. And we are blending our directional warp with the distance node, and we will use an edge detect on this to define our shape. So we have some of these artifacts. We will get rid of them a bit later. At first we will use a flood fill node combined with flood fill to grayscale and distance. To get the needed directionality, I'm using flood fill combined with flood fill to gradient and set the angle to 45 degrees. So now our ice shells are directing in one direction. So to get rid of the artifacts I mentioned, we will use a bevel on our edge detect with a slight distance amount and a bit of smoothing. And we will blend it with the flood filter gradient, and we'll use a multiply blending mode. So this effect is now a bit subtle. To make it better, we will use a blur HQ grayscale, and we'll always set the quality at 1 for this node. So our base now looks good. And we want some imperfections now, and we'll use a BNW spots 1 with high pass grayscale and a histogram scan and a non-uniform blur grayscale. And we blend it on top with subtract blending mode. So to get some more imperfections, we will be using the fractal sum base and also blend it on top with multiply, and we'll set down the opacity. So now for the cracks, we can copy our tile sampler with the histogram scan and distance node from before, and also the directional warp to break the straight lines. And we'll use an edge detect again and slope blur it with Gaussian noise as the slope input. So we'll use an safe transform to make the cracks smaller without breaking the tiling, because if we would use a transform node, the transform node normally breaks the tiling, so we'll use safe transform instead. So we will blend the cracks on top, and we'll use copy with a low opacity amount. So now we need to mask this because we don't want the cracks on every of these shells, so we take our flood fill node and apply a flood fill to random color node. And then we'll use a histogram scan on this, so we get our mask for the cracks. We set the contrast to 1 on our histogram scan node to get full white values, and to get different shards selected we'll play a bit with the random seed on our flood fill to random grayscale node. So now to get a bit more distortion on the ice shells, we'll use a Clouds 2 node and blend it on top. We will also use histogram scan on our output, on our last output, to highlight the tips of the shells a bit, and we'll blend it on the top to simulate some snow. We'll use a histogram range to make the imperfections and the whole material a bit more subtle. So for the albedo we'll use the last output and put it into a gradient map with bluish colors. we'll also need to apply our cracks. So we take the last cracks output and invert it. Also we apply a gradient map to this, and we'll make the gradient with transparency and white values and blend it with the previous gradient map. So we need the transparency to only color the actual cracks and not the room between them. And we'll also use our mask from before. So we only have the cracks colors where the cracks actually are. So next we'll make ourselves a curvature node, curvature smooth node. So we need to set the normal amount a bit higher, and then we'll take the curvature smooth node and we'll blend it on top with copy and an opacity value of like 0.2. So now to get some snowy lines at the edges, we'll use a shadow node on our flood filter random grayscale, and we'll invert it, and we'll also blend it on top. We also use a gradient map and set some light bluish values and also the opacity value for the first value to 0. So next we'll make an HBAO ambient occlusion node and invert it. So this is to fill the imperfections with a bit of snow. We'll also need a gradient map to blend it properly. So now it already looks great. So we'll need to make a roughness map now, and we'll take our last output and combine it with the cracks and our cracks mask. And we set the blending mode to multiply. We invert it to get the roughness right. And now we'll use our fractal sum base for some randomness. We'll also use our previous imperfections and blend it on top. So here I'm using a different HDRI map to get a better overview of the effect. So next we'll take our first gradient map and apply an grayscale conversation node to make the snowy tips a bit rougher. And in the end we'll be using levels to tune the roughness a bit. And you can make your eyes more shiny by darkening the roughness, but that really depends on your desired outcome. So if you would like to see more of these beginner tutorials, please let me know in the comments below. Yeah, I hope you liked this tutorial and see you next time.